In 2009, a couple of my friends and I rented our first house. We had just loaded in all of the furniture and finally decided to call it a day. We sat down on our couch, powered on the console, and then I heard a noise that ended up changing my life forever. After bulldozing through the World at War campaign, like many other Call of Duty fans, we were presented with a strange secret cutscene that ended up being some sort of Nazi zombies game mode. We shrugged it off, but after eventually burning out over multiplayer, we decided to see what it was all about. And I know this is the part of the story where I'm supposed to say, and we were hooked, or whatever other dramatic bullcrap would fit in there, but to be honest, we didn't really like it. Out of the four of us, I obviously ended up enjoying it the most, as I have a YouTube channel surrounding this topic, but even still, it took months before I even took the mode seriously. In fact, I didn't even understand the concept of DLC or map packs. I had been playing the base map for months until one of my friends told me that there was more content to be purchased. Then suddenly I went from having one zombie map to 4. I played each map in succession, thinking that it was some sort of a story game, because I'm an idiot. And although it wasn't that type of story game, playing the maps in order gave me a sense of what the developers had in mind for their vision. And since this vision was so new, as well as being new to Call of Duty in general, playing these maps in order allowed players to watch development in almost real time. After many hours spent learning this game mode, I had finally made my way through the endless waves of Noct, gone insane on Verrucht, and flogged the hell out of the dogs on Shino Numa. But where I ended up spending most of my time was on a little map named Riese, a map so integral to the foundation of zombies that no one, not even Treyarch themselves, had realized it. And now, I was hooked. I won't blame you if you're upset with me that I'm not going to break down each version of this map individually. I actually had been pondering about that for a while. Is it the right decision? Maybe not, but I felt that the purpose of this review was not to nitpick the details between all of the versions, but to highlight how without this map, we would not be playing zombies the way we know it in present day. If you have come in later to the zombies life cycle, I welcome you, because there is no mode or community that can replicate what we have. It really is that special. But you should know your history, and Riese began all of this. Riese pushed forward the idea that zombies could be more than just a survival mode. So what were these improvements that I'm talking about? I think they can actually be split off into a few different categories. Number 1, map design. Number 2, transportation. Number 3, narrative. And number 4, gameplay innovation. Let's start with number 1. Up until Riese, the map layouts were much more unique rather than standardized around gameplay. The community and Treyarch were more or less working in tandem with one another, and what I mean by that is Treyarch would create and players would strategize. But, and this is a big but, strategy was very limited in the early days, and slowly but surely, Treyarch started to learn what players were doing and started to design their maps to cater to zombies rather than copying design methods from multiplayer and the campaign. Because let's face it, zombies is an entirely different mode, and you need the maps to be designed around that, otherwise things just won't work out. So what was different from each map leading up to Riese? Let's briefly recap. Nacht der Untoten was an abandoned building with 4 main areas, but due to lack of depth in the mode at this point, players would die early on because you could not escape the horde due to the close quarters nature of the map, and training was a player's strategy and development, so to speak. Verrucht had a similar claustrophobic feel to Nacht, but emphasized aesthetically. Whether Treyarch had meant to do this or not, the one thing Verrucht added to the mix was the ability to train the whole map. Besides that, there was no real way to use the map defensively other than traps, of course. Shino Numa took a slightly different approach with map design, making the player begin in a central hub. And instead of exploring an entire building or universal area, there were subsects or branches attached to their own unique areas. However, each branch was literally a dead end, providing that the player would eventually get overrun by zombies. When Riese came about, Treyarch started to realize how to design a map for zombies players by taking away and adding feature sets from both DLCs 1 and 2. We have Verrucht's fluid feel with being able to use the whole map, but the element of claustrophobia is removed, allowing the player to look up and take a breath for God's sake. Treyarch also heavily emphasized the central hub and branches concept from Shino Numa, but there was a twist. Rather than the players getting trapped because of zombies and other gameplay mechanics, Treyarch gave us a way out with a teleporter. And this one little concept changed the way we play zombies forever. And this leads me into my next bullet, transportation. Now, Obviously, I am not a game designer, but I often wonder how frequently developers create gameplay mechanics that are meant for one thing, but then the player base uses it for a completely different task. It's my belief that Treyarch created the teleporters as a way to escape the horde if things got tough, but players could and did actually use them to get to the central hub faster so that we could travel to one of the other wings more quickly to buy more ammo and hit the box, as well as get to Pack-a-Punch. Once Treyarch saw this, they realized how important traveling can be for zombies, and that's why we have teleportation systems in most maps to this day. Players now are able to utilize traversal fluidly, freely, and quickly. This benefits speedruns or high round run escape plans. Regardless of which method you choose, it's still another concept that stemmed from Riese. Narrative. While it's clear that Shinonuma was the map that really began the story, where Treyarch began to sink their talons into the fanbase was most certainly with Riese. There was now a reason for this zombie outbreak, and a sinister one at that. We were introduced to Maxis, Samantha, and Richtofen, and beginning to understand how intense experiments gave us the outbreak and teases about who was in control of the undead. I think one of the most fun and crucial pieces of narrative information was learning that Richtofen created the Wunderwaffe. This solidified the lore from DLC 2 that Richtofen was a psychopathic doctor who knew no bounds, which lines up perfectly with the doctor that we know and love today, but maybe not nearly as psychotic. These characters and wonder weapons were on their way to becoming superstars in the COD community, and while Treyarch was sort of just throwing things at the wall to see what would stick, I gotta say, these first building blocks were immensely captivating and had created a high level of anticipation that really led the zombies community down so many different rabbit holes. It was just an amazing way to start building their universe. Before we get into what I think the biggest innovator was for Riese, we need to discuss the idea of the wonder weapon, and in Riese's case, this was the Wunderwaffe. While we saw this same weapon in the previous map, Shinonuma, this concept opened the doors for zombies in so many ways, as it is still something we expect in our zombies maps to this day. It was literally groundbreaking and gave players something to look forward to alongside every new map. I know we may have a different opinion on wonder weapons now, as we have seen so many over the course of the decade, but at this point in time, wonder weapons were part of a map's identity. And while I think the Wunderwaffe was and is important, I think there are a few things that are more crucial when it comes to the game mode as a whole. These things are power and Pack-a-Punch, training and camping, and the flytrap Easter egg. Let's talk about power and Pack-a-Punch first. Out of the previous 3 maps, only Verrückt had a power switch to open up the map, turn on the perk machines, and traps. Neither Nacht nor Shinonuma had a power switch for us, and I find that really strange. To go from a very brief and single instance idea to now implementing it on a much grander scale, I mean, that's interesting. And this is where I think Treyarch realized they had struck gold. The idea that the player needs to be on the brink of death up and until the moment they turn on the power was an amazing play by the devs. But with Riese, they turned everything up a notch, providing the player with a little more incentive, a Pack-a-Punch machine. Now obviously, you should know what this is by now, but this is a machine that allows you to upgrade your weapon into something a little more special. We now had a mini journey to pursue while simultaneously building up our character with perks and other weapons. Linking teleporters to the mainframe, watching the door to the machine inch its way open, to finally being able to place your gun inside of this weird mechanism that changed your weapon's look, feel, ammo count, and most importantly, its damage output. Every weapon was given a boost in ways that gave the player, what seemed like at the time, infinite options when it came to their weapons. This tiny, simple, yet magnificent idea changed the way, again, I've said this a million times, that we played zombies forever. Not only did it change the way that we played, but it became the staple opening sequence to nearly every map in every game by every developer. I'm not kidding. Think about it. So what else did I want to talk about? Oh yeah, training. I'm sure deep in the depths of the zombies community, there was somebody out there who was like, bro, I started training on like Nocturne and Toten, dude. What the f are you talking about? Okay, whatever. There are always exceptions to the rule. But what I'm trying to highlight here is that there were multiple areas to survive in. There was not just one path or area to focus on like we had seen in the previous maps. For example, you can't really train or camp well in Nacht. You can sort of train the whole map in Verrückt and there are traps. And you can kind of train by the Flogger and Shinonuma. But what I'm talking about here here is multiple strategies in one map. This was a big step forward that Riese allowed players to take. Take a second and think about what your favorite strat was on Riese. And now, while I'm sure 99% of you said the catwalk main, you could also train in the courtyard by the power switch or train the whole map. You could even train in the mainframe courtyard if you knew how to control the fence hoppers. All of this to say is that there was not just one strategy anymore, and Treyarch had ultimately given us the freedom by understanding what we wanted to give the player various opportunities to execute their method of choice. Now lastly, I think it's important that we touch on the flytrap Easter egg. I don't necessarily believe that this is where the long-form quest idea was born. I do think that it contributed to the idea of adding in main quests in general. If you don't know, and I don't know how you do not know at this point, you can shoot a power switch outside of the map, hear Samantha laugh, and then play hide and seek with her by finding items she has obviously hidden around the map. It was very freaking cool back in the day, and it sent players into every direction. They were flipping over every stone trying to find more story bits or things to do, whatever they could conjure up in their minds to not break immersion. That is really powerful, and I think Treyarch had a lot of aha moments when it came to these newly implemented feature sets that they placed into Riese. No longer were the maps static with player goals, strategy, and traversal. The game had officially been changed. Fans were instinctively drawn towards Riese because every single element that Treyarch put into this map was so simple yet timeless. From power, pack-a-punch, training areas, the first ever Easter egg, camping areas, transportation. All of these things are staples in the zombies formula. Of course, you could argue this means that new maps are outdated, or maybe zombies is just stale and out of new ideas. But I prefer to look at things through a different lens. A lens that shows how ahead of its time Riese was. The fact that its game mechanics were not simply map defining, but genre defining. It has allowed for some of the greatest maps ever to flourish because Treyarch recognized from Riese how many beautiful gameplay mechanics were born. Mob, Origins, Dreisendrach, Gorod, 9, all of these maps have core mechanics from Riese, just with a different coat of paint on them. This allows us to relive that sacred experience over and over again. I don't think we're ever going to have another Riese in zombies, and to be honest, that's okay. Of course we're going to see innovation in this mode, don't get me wrong. It happens in every Black Ops title. But what makes Riese and all of the remakes special is how at this point in time, the mode was being built alongside a small and growing fandom. There was camaraderie between the players and Treyarch, which left so much to be discovered. Riese, the Giant, whatever you want to call it, it was the culmination of that. It isn't just a zombies map, it's a relic in time. And to say that it isn't special is to misunderstand its importance and how without it, we wouldn't have the mode we know and love today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.